We're eating into Bill's time.
Okay, I appreciate everyone joining tonight. I'm still looking for another topic for the December meeting. Right now I have one of our new observatory partners is going to talk about Voyager. And Voyager is one of the new school imaging programs and sequencers. And one of the nice things about Voyager is it also supports handling arrays of telescopes. Right now they've got two big refractors and it handles autofocusing on both and dithering and all kinds of things. Not only that, but it also has, web interface and a bunch of other stuff. So it's a kind of a neat program. And one of the reasons why I avoided it was it only supported new cameras. It didn't support my old SIGs that don't have ASTOM. But I've recently found out that it supports like Maxim DL's camera or the SkyX's camera. So you can use it with pretty much any camera that'll interface with one of those or any of the new cameras. So it should be interesting, and we might actually do he might be able to show us some live imaging if it's clear. So with that in mind, why don't you go ahead and take over, Bill?
I'll share this presentation. I was telling, oops, I think I'm trying to share the wrong thing. Let me try this again, share. Screen size has failed to start, or screen sharing's failed to start. Let me try this one.
Okay, that's working.
Let me try this. Is that visible?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say I'm not the best person to talk about this, but I've certainly fumbled around through it and got it to work. So I mentioned, somebody else in the group mentioned they were wanting to know more about how to get off-axis guiding working with Sequence Generator Pro using PhD. So I'll walk through how I do it and some things that I found a bit tricky that are kind of unique to off-axis guiding with Sequence Generator Pro. So feel free as always to jump in if you have better ideas. But the short story is I like to start by configuring off-axis guiding first in PhD 2. And there's a couple settings, particularly around search area and star mass, that can clean up some problems associated with off-axis guiding that don't happen with on-axis guiding. And I also want to show the debug utility. If you haven't used the debug utility with PhD2, it's really fantastic, and it's always kind of interesting to see what's going on in the background. Then the next thing I do is configure auto guiding equipment in Sequence Generator Pro, and there's a few settings there that are quite useful, like when it starts, when it stops, what does it do when you're autofocusing, what does it do in end of sequence, what does it do if it gets lost, and how often do you have it restart? So some good things to look at there. And then I start my sequence, and there's integrated into Sequence Generator Pro, there's a guiding window so you can see what's going on. By the way, I don't want to speak down to anybody, but I always find acronyms kind of confusing. So SGP is Sequence Generator Pro, OAG is off-axis guiding, and PhD, as I understand, stands for Press Here Dummy, although I spelled here wrong. So with off-axis guiding, I won't go into all the details. There's lots of information about on-axis versus off-axis guiding. But the big thing about off-axis guiding is there's always a little pick-off prism or some device that picks off a little bit of the light from the edge of the field and directs it up into the guide camera. If you look face on to a CCD, like in the upper right, this is the way mine work. There's the sensor, but just above the sensor, there's this little pickoff prism that directs the light then up to the guide camera. They sell these off-axis guiders for use with either digital SLRs or with a CCD. You can add your own off-axis guider if you have enough back focus. And again, the prism's right there. It deflects a little bit of light up there. What's nice about an off-axis guider is it moves with the camera. It's not on the side of the scope. So if there's any what's called differential flexure between the guide camera and your imaging camera, things get kind of messed up. Whereas having the guider right on the camera, if there's any flexure of the camera mount or the mechanics of the telescope, that's taken out by having the guider ride with the camera. And the other advantage of this and the reason it's off axis is you'll notice the prism is taking light that wouldn't otherwise hit the image sensor. So you're not taking away any light. It's light you weren't going to use for imaging anyway. It's off the axis. It's off the imaging camera.
Doesn't that?
Real quick, are you going to say anything about the prism size?
Yeah, maybe I should. The prisms are pretty small. This doesn't really show it. This is an old sensor. I mean, most of the sensors are larger, but this prism size, these prisms are really quite small. And some of them have adjustments that let you determine how far down into the path. So depending on the speed of your telescope, you kind of want to get that prism down as close as you can without clipping light. Anything else you think should be said about the?
I was just going to say that they tend to be small. So you think you can buy an auto guider camera with a bigger chip, but it doesn't work out for you because the prism only gives so much light. So you end up with an image on the auto guider camera that's black in different places because it's not totally illuminated.
Yeah, good point. Oops. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Tom.
I guess that doesn't cause any diffraction problems?
The prism, that's part of how you space it. You know, if the ones that are adjustable, you kind of move it down, and if you're causing a diffraction problem, you'll see some fringes on your sensor. But usually the prism's close enough to the image plane, you don't see much diffraction. So this is an on-axis arrangement. Here's my camera. This is my guide scope. It has its own scope, and here's my camera. So this is what's considered an on-axis configuration. It's a separate telescope. And again, the challenge here is if my focuser is kind of bending as I go through the night and the telescope's rotating, this camera over here won't pick it up. Similarly, if I've got flexure in this mount, anything that's different mechanically between the guide camera and the main camera as the telescope's moving through the night would create a guide error. But in this arrangement, you know, I've got my guide camera using a pickoff prism on my main camera that's all together. So that eliminates the problem. And that's the big advantage of a guide camera is it removes any of that differential between your guide scope and your main camera. But I don't want to go too much into auto guiding because you guys know more than I do here, but I do love this UHY5L camera. It's got a really good quantum efficiency, very sensitive, and it's got an 1.25 inch outer diameter. So you can see from the previous picture, it just fits perfectly into my my guide port. One of the things that took me a while to get over is that no matter how well you focus, you're not going to have nice, pretty images. I think Dan described it once as a Star Trek image. They're going to flare. You're using this off-axis image highly off-axis, well beyond what's corrected. So there's lots of coma and astigmatism and other issues. And the point is, don't worry about it. PhD is looking at the centroid. It can handle these wonky looking images. I just try to focus it in general across the images as well as I can and leave it alone. Similarly, and I don't know what you have all experienced, but I sometimes get these unusual calibration, and it's not unusual for PhD to throw up a warning that my calibration's unusual. And what's unusual here is that the axes aren't right angles. The right ascension and the declination should be right angles. And if it's greater than a certain number of degrees, I don't know what they put in there, 5 degrees or something, it'll throw up this warning. It's good to know. I usually ignore it because it doesn't, I haven't seen it affect the results. And I think it's related to this astigmatic shape that as the telescope moves around to calibrate, or if the image is in certain parts of the field of view versus others, there's a coupling between the right ascension and declination. So, you know, if this is your kind of your hang up, like, why do I keep getting this error message? My suggestion is try ignoring the error message and see if things still guide well for you.
Hey, so Bill, I could offer a little bit of insight about that. So I was
Great.
using PhD2 last night and finally getting around to actually looking at the calibration data, because I've just been kind of ignoring it for now. And
Right.
I was not getting good guiding, but I will say last night anyway, the angle between those two axes for in my case was more like about 40 degrees.
Oh,
It was an acute angle, not even close to 90. And, you know, I've been reading a little bit of stuff on the online and whatnot, and it seemed like some theorizing that that's possibly related to inadequate polar alignment. There's a lot of possibilities, I think. And so I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to get it closer to 90 degrees, sort of look like you have there. But I agree, it doesn't have to be perfect. And PhD2 will find a star and keep it going.
Yeah.
Maybe it needs to be better than 40 degrees.
Could be. You know, thanks for that, Dave. I'd be very interested in what you find out. I'm going to play around. This is a good kind of marginal night thing to play with, because I am a bit curious. But to your point, just because these aren't right angles, the conversion matrix that is done during this calibration. So what PhD is doing is setting up a conversion matrix that relates XY pixels to right ascension declination. It can very much handle this, what I'm showing here. The fact that there's some coupling doesn't prevent PhD from properly converting pixels to right ascension. So it works okay. But you're right, if it gets to be really a wide angle, I think it gets concerned. There's too much cross coupling between the two axes, and it might not guide right. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. By the way, in the log file I show up above, you can see what the calibration angle is. It'll tell you, so you can see if that's an issue or not. The other thing that I find very, very helpful, it's just sometimes fun to look at, is this free application on the website for PhD2. Somebody wrote a log viewer. So PhD by default is set up to log all the events throughout the night, and it's a great resource. I'm going to try to bring this up here. Can you see this?
We still see the log viewer.
Okay, so I'm going to change the way I'm sharing so you can see my whole screen. I think is the easier way to do it. Okay, so hopefully you can see this new log viewer. But what it's showing is everything that's happened. So you can click on calibration. It's showing you your calibration result. It'll show guiding, and here's me kind of getting started. Okay, here I'm actually doing a run. It's going to show the declination, right ascension, guiding. It's going to show the corrections that were applied. You can zoom in and zoom out, so you can really get a good view of what happened throughout the night. And one of the things, for instance, here, I don't know if you can see that very well, but it says 2x no star found. So twice it couldn't find the star. Then it says star lost, mass changed. Well, this baffled me for a while. I don't know what I'm doing on my telescope that would change the mass of a star, but in reading the help, it means it's really just saying the total integrated brightness had changed more than it had expected. So we'll talk about that setting, because that comes up more often in off-axis guiding than it does on on-axis. But any dithering, all that stuff's there. So I don't know if you guys have used this tool, but it's really quite helpful. Your RMS, You can also, you know, just look at a portion of it, see what happened in that portion of the night. Great way to diagnose something that might be going wrong. So what happens if something goes wrong? Well, these two settings are often used to get an off-axis guide problem resolved, particularly if you're using a Schmidt-Cassegrain, which doesn't work really well with off-axis guide, or at least for me has been frustrating. You can change the search region, or you can change this tolerance to star mass detection. So I think I just mentioned that you get the star mass error message. And what this is saying is, well, it'll let that star mass change 50% before it says, hey, I've lost the star. You can increase that to 100% or just disable it and try that. Try guiding with that disabled because, you know, who cares if the star is getting brighter or dimmer as long as you're still able to track. So that's in that little brain. You click on the brain, pops open this, look under guiding and take a look at these. One other thing I should say on this page, I know this is obvious, but when you're doing off-axis guiding, your focal length is the focal length of your main scope. It's not your guide scope because you don't have a guide scope anymore. It's using your main scope. So, well, I'm not sure why that got so small. But this is the PhD view. What I was trying to show there is, again, these stars are all flared across here because I'm so far off axis, but it's still not a problem. It's not a problem. It'll connect. And in the window in the upper right, it's hard to read. I was trying to brag there a bit, but I had less than 1 arc-second auto guiding with off axis. So it, you know, it does work. It works quite well after you kind of get past some of the setup. I found that wide field refractors work best. The images are not as aberrated, they're brighter, tends to be more stars to find. The worst for me is Schmidt-Cassegrain. I've tried auto guiding. I've had okay with a focal reducer down at f6, but when you're at f10, it's hard to pick up stars, and the stars are so astigmatic. It's even more than what PhD can usually handle. So I don't even try anymore in that configuration. All right, so now flipping over to Sequence Generator Pro. I'm going to bring up Sequence Generator Pro. Hopefully you can see this Sequence Generator Pro screen. The first place to start is in the Equipment Profile Manager. And I'm going to take this is a profile I recently created. And over here in the tab that says Auto Guider, that's where you'd want to go. And you pick, you know, what auto guide are you using? Well, if you're using PhD 2, you actually, obviously, you pick PhD 2. And this is important because, again, if you're saying, wow, I tried auto guide and it keeps telling me it can't, if you're a dummy like me, maybe you forgot to tell Sequence Generator Pro that it needs to connect to PhD 2. And then when you do that, usually you can check, it's going to find the default of where the install path is. And you can also tell it to pick a default profile. If, again, here's another thing that was, oh, well, I can't get it to work. It just won't work. I picked PhD 2. Check to verify that this install path is set right. And if it isn't, go find the program. And it's going to be in a program folder somewhere that says PhD 2, and the exe will be in that folder somewhere here. PhD guiding. And you know, it's a little bit of an extra step, but it'll find it then when you give it the right folder. But you can also tell it what profile to use. I usually don't do that. I usually start my guider separately, but you can force it for a given target to use a specific profile from PhD. So it's reading the PhD profiles in this example. And then finally, you can tell it, particularly if you're setting it and you want to go to bed and have it start imaging at a certain time, you can have it open up and connect to your gear at the start of the sequence automatically. You can see I don't do that. I'll explain why in a minute, but this is effective. And you can also tell it to disconnect when the sequence is done, so it's not there kind of whirring away after your telescope is finished. One final thing I'll mention is if you still can't get Sequence Generator Pro to somehow find PhD, or if it does find it, it never seems to connect. This is a little clue. PhD server options, it's pointing to a port. You can check to make sure that PhD 2 has the same port, or that port's enabled, that it's allowing itself to be remotely controlled. Rarely a problem, but if it really just never seems to be able to communicate, it's something to look at, that these two communication ports are the same. Another set of settings I like to adjust is, well, I should back up one, dither. I'm sure you all know what dither is. I won't go into too much detail, but I usually use medium dither. Dither is between your imaging frames. PhD will shift your image a few pixels, and you can pick whether it does it a very small amount or a really large amount, but it's intentionally oscillating your image a bit from one image to the other. And the reason it's doing that is then when you go to stack these images and use a pixel rejection algorithm, that algorithm's going to have a much easier time rejecting hot pixels or something weird, because it's going to see that pixel is moving around over the image. So when you go to stack and align, that hotspot now is moving around, and then when you go to do image integration, and it's going to stand out as a highly unusual pixel, and it can be rejected. So I use dither as a fantastic way to try to get rid of hot pixels during your stacking. The other thing to take a look at if you can't get it to work is your settling. The default, I think, when I first used Sequence Generator Pro, was something like 1/4 of a pixel. Like, wow, that's a pretty tight tolerance for me. My equipment at the time wasn't capable of that. So I changed that settling to be 3 pixels. So that's probably a little bit big. 1.5 pixels is probably a better compromise. But if it's too tight, if that's like 1/4 of a pixel, you could be sitting there for 5 minutes waiting for everything to settle down to a point where Sequence Generator Pro feels like it's gotten consistent results. It looks like it's not working, but really it's just that it doesn't feel that it's settled down. So probably a 1.5 pixels is not a bad choice. Alternately, you can say, or in addition, you can say, wait 5 seconds. I do that manually. I'll show you how, but you can have that set up automatically. And then I stop my auto guider when the sequence completes. There's just no reason for it to continue to try to figure out what's going on. You can also pause it during autofocus, so that can be useful. You don't want, if you're autofocusing, you don't want necessarily your image moving around as your autofocuser tries to hold it in the same spot, particularly if your autofocus shifts the image a little bit and then your auto guider is trying to recenter it and take an image. It can really slow things down. So you can decide. I don't have it pause, or I do have it pause when I auto guide. I haven't used my autofocus much, but that's what I plan to do, is just stop guiding during autofocus. Blah blah blah. You can set all kinds of different stuff, including if your auto guider went bonkers, you can have it restart the frame. So those are some settings to look at. The other thing I'll point out on the screen, I'm going to go back to the presentation, is, I talked about the install path, is on the screen, there's these 2 areas where you can monitor your guider while you're imaging. So when you start a sequence, the Sequence Generator Pro will reach out to communicate to PhD2 and start guiding. And how do you know that worked? Well, one way is down here. It's telling you that it's connected. This orange light is telling you PHD2 is not calibrated. When it is calibrated, it'll go green. And then when it's guiding, it'll this little strange icon will go green as well. The other way you know is you can bring up the guiding window. By default, it's with the frame and focus window, and it's on a different tab, but you can pull it open from the tools. So this graph will start to live show your guiding curve. So I'll flip back over to PhD. So here's what I'm referring to. Normally, when you start out, the frame and focus window is open, ready for you to take a snap, but you can flip over to this other window, which shows your guiding graph, which is nice. It's all on one screen. Yeah, so just before I go back into a few other details, it really can work well. It's a productive package of having PhD integrated with Sequence Generator Pro, and the off-axis guiding, as I've found, improved my guiding. I didn't have a huge number of problems with the on-axis guider, but I've noticeably improved things. First time I've been able to get down to less than 1 arcsecond RMS guiding, but do expect flared, highly astigmatic images, and if needed, increase the search area and our mass loss tolerance, and that it might help if Sequence Generator, I'm sorry, if PhD is not willing to try increasing those things. I didn't mention longer exposure times, but you'll not only need them, but they can be beneficial with off-axis guiding, not only because you won't be chasing seeing, but because these images can be dimmer off-axis, and you want to catch as much of the centroid as you can. So getting longer exposure times, I try to get no less than 3 seconds. 4 seconds is common for me. I've gone up to 5 seconds if I need to get enough light. Again, another reason why, if you're used to on-axis guiding, where I could regularly, if I wanted to, use a half second or a second, for off-axis guiding, that might not work, and it might not look like the system's responding properly, and it's probably because the exposure time just isn't right. Reviewing the log file helps a lot. It's going to tell you everything that PhD thought went wrong, and be sure to tell Sequence Generator Pro to use PhD and that those are connecting. And it's helpful to set your into profile. What I'd like to know now is just show you how I go through a night. It's probably not the most productive way, but I just like going this way. I start out with Sequence Generator Pro. I get my sequence open, and I connect my camera, and I connect my filter wheel, and I've got my camera set up so that on startup, I could do that here, no. In the equipment profile, tools, equipment manager, my camera is here. It's on my standard profile. There's a box cool down when camera connected, or you can wait until sequence start, but that'd be a waste of time. So I have it set up to where as soon as I connect my camera via connect here, I can see my cooler kick on and the temperature is going to drop. That just gets it started so that while it's cooling, I flip over then and start setting up my auto guider. Here, I connect my equipment. It's not the right one. Where am I? There it is. Yeah, I don't know where it is. I'm going to bring it up again. Yeah. So it's not letting me for some reason. I've got a window open somewhere that it's not happy about. I don't know. At any rate, I will connect my equipment, and then I go through a calibration if I need to, work it, just start my guider, let it kind of settle out, see if I need to, if I have any balance issues. Sometimes I balance my declination axis too well. If so, I put a weight on to unbalance it enough that it can guide well. I set this exposure time to about a half a second or 1 second. And then I let it I go through the calibration, so it'll do it fast. It's going to do 1 second steps instead of 3 second steps. And then after it's done calibrating, then I go and set it for 3 seconds or 4 seconds, so I get a better guide quality. The guide quality is not critical during calibration, so that speeds that up. By the time I finish all of this, I'm ready to go back to the auto guider. I'm sorry, Sequence Generator Pro. My guider's now ready to go. I can tell Sequence Generator Pro to slew to my target, center up, start my sequence, and monitor that my graph's working well. So that's just kind of a workflow I prefer, and that's why I don't have things automated. But I pointed those out. If you are working remotely or you're setting it up to start up after moonrise, there's virtually everything that you would do in Sequence Generator Pro with your with PhD can be automated. I think that's all I have. Sorry, it's a bit of a short topic, but I am kind of curious how many people are using the this log viewer. Is anybody using that?
No, Bill, I have not used it because I didn't know anything about it, but now I do. So I will.
Yeah, this is Michael. I do it. I use it quite often. I was troubleshooting a bunch of guiding issues a while back and learned about this, and it does it shows you a lot of good stuff in there when you're trying to troubleshoot issues.
I'll walk through this real quick. I mean, what it's doing on the left is taking the log section. So if you don't know it, PhD is monitoring your every breath while you're imaging and putting that into a text log file.
Kind of like Facebook, huh?
Like very much like Facebook. In fact, I think Zuckerberg now bought PhD too. And and it divides it into these sections. So here's my calibration section. And here's everything about the calibration you might care about: the angles, how many pixels it moved, how many pixels per arc second. It's also got some of your settings like your dithering, so you can check to see if it's what you had intended. And then the other ones are just guiding sections, and you can zoom in or zoom out to any section you care about. Like right here, things really clearly went cattywampus.
Huh?
I'll zoom in there. So I've zoomed in on this section, and it's telling me here I had 1.66 arc second things. And it looks pretty clear to me, not incredibly clear, that my problem was with the RA axis more than the deck axis. So that tells me what I would want to look at. I probably wasn't east heavy. Maybe I had some cords. I'm terrible about having cords dangling and vibrating and causing me issues. This is a nice message to see too. Remember I said that Sequence Generator Pro won't start the auto guider if it hasn't settled. So this is one way you know how quickly or how long that's taking, is it's telling you, okay, it's settled. It's obviously dithered, settled, and you're ready to go. It's telling you how much it's dithered. So yeah, quite a bit of information. If it's lost star mass, you'll find it. And then above here's the log. No, that's not true. You can pull up the text file and review every line in the text file if you really felt like you needed to do it.
Bill,
Yeah.
what version of Sequence Generator Pro are you currently running?
2.9, I'll bet. Oh,
I'll show you.
3.2?
3.02, I think it is. Let me look. A minute.
You're not running version 4.
My Zoom controls. I didn't know there was a version 4.
Oh, that's the new licensing stuff.
Oh no, that's what I have. I thought I did.
No,
3.2.
I think there's a 620 that's available on the old licensing, but if you want to go to the new stuff, it's 4 something.
Oh, okay.
Just wondering.
I signed up, so maybe I just didn't download it properly. I noticed when I started the presentation tonight, it told me that there's a new file available.
The reason I was going to ask that question is if you'd noticed any difference between version 3 and version 4, if version 4 was worthwhile getting.
Have you noticed?
But since you don't, you can't.
No, I haven't. I thought I was using the latest one, but I guess I'm clearly not.
when you say new licensing, Steve, what do you mean by that? What kind of licensing?
Yearly,
How much? What?
I think yearly.
So if you don't pay for your year, it just kind of stops working on you?
I think.
No, that's not it. You only get support if you pay the yearly fee.
Okay.
It doesn't stop working. You just can't get updates and you can't use the newer support.
I gotta go look at version 4. See, it says my subscription's active. When I look for updates, it's telling me there's a minor update available, but obviously I have to go out there and take a look.
I think that update gets you to the newer security license server they have.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a stair-step approach.
Hey, Bill. Back on your graph, on that performance graph. That vertical scale, is that arc seconds?
Yes.
And then quite honestly, you kind of zoomed in on a section saying, and here's something kind of went haywire. And quite honestly, I couldn't see much of a difference between that section and everywhere else. What were you using as a haywire criteria?
These right ascension spikes that were
Okay.
really high frequency. To me, something's bouncing around. I often see this when I don't tie my cables down well and they're wagging in the breeze, as opposed to say here. This is a terrible way to look at it, but I'll do it anyway. Let's see if I can reset my.
Yeah, I see. Oh, I lean back, take my glasses off. Yeah, okay.
I have to go back and read how to clear these areas, but
because on the far right, notice that your red and blue trace actually go, yeah, to your right, to your right, to your right, other right.
Oh,
the right hand's no, the right. No, don't keep. Never mind.
too far.
Right there, stop. On the right edge of the graph, I see that the red and the blue are now peaking way up at 3, as opposed to the middle of that graph.
Right. Yeah.
And do you think that's caused by cabling? Yeah.
I don't know.
It almost looks like the extremes of the graph. You get the red and blue peak out, and then in the middle it tends to settle down.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can look at my
settling?
notes. Let's see, this was November 6th. I can check to see if it was a windy night. I don't think the wind was an issue. But I do know on that night I completely changed my wiring configuration, and I hadn't tied everything down yet. I'm sometimes a bit sloppy. I mentioned star mass. You can add the star mass plot if you're getting that star mass message a lot. You can kind of see how the star mass. So this is just telling you, again, star mass, what they really mean is integrated brightness. And someone correct me if I'm interpreting that wrong. Looks pretty stable through the night, but you can check it. another thing that will cause star mass to drop out just before you lose star tracking is clouds moving in. If you get high thin clouds, it's still tracking, but it makes the star mass become unstable. How many people are off-axis guiding now?
I'm using it on my refractor. I have my long scope. I've been using off-axis guiding for a lot of years because I had Fletcher on everything that I used a guide scope on.
I've used it off and on. I haven't used it out in New Mexico, but in St. Louis I did because of flexure problems.
Yeah, and I decided to go with an off-axis guider for this 92 millimeter refractor, just to kind of keep it small and simple and eliminate those, extra pieces and be lined up.
Well, now that begs a question. If you're saying you're getting flexure problems, is that affecting your final output image?
Yes, because your guide scope is guiding and your other scope is moving in a different direction.
Okay. So there's flexure of your entire system. I was thinking you're referring to flexure of your optical system. The main scope that you're using.
No, just the well,
like that image there. He's got a guider, and you're saying so. Yeah, so where the imaging system is pointing is changing. Where and where the guide scope is looking are actually changing while you're driving.
right.
Oh,
And one other big thing is with SCTs, the mirror moves around, so you also have that kind of flexure too, where the mirror moves as it tracks across the sky.
At what point? I guess what I'm wondering is, does it really? Do you see a big effect in wide field imaging? And by wide field, I mean like 2 or 3 degree field.
No, because those typically you can have more air and you have a lot more leeway. You might be able to move 10 pixels one way or another before it shows up in your image.
Okay.
Where with a longer scope, you might be able to move 1 pixel.
Okay.
The mention about weight is a good point. This auto guider arrangement, I think it weighed 2 pounds, and this was really a beefy piece of metal. And you can see it's on the top of the scope, so it's cantilevered out as far as you can get.
Yeah.
When I took that off and went to an off-axis guider, it saved all that weight. And anything I can do to save weight just makes everything more stable.
So on this image though, so you've got an off-axis guider at the focuser between the camera and the scope, right?
On this view, I don't have an off-axis guider. It's this
No,
one.
I mean the off-axis. Go back to the other picture. So on this kind of rig, you would have your off-axis guider between your camera and the focuser, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now what happens is, now you've got that lever arm created by the off-axis guider and the camera, more or less twisting your tube, right?
Well, that's true too. And some people, I don't know if I've seen that, but other people have reported that, where that torque or torsion or whatever it is between the camera and that heavy guider hanging on there can cause issues. And you can imagine this too, right? If you're in this orientation, you have one loading. If you're pointed straight up, you're going to have a different loading.
Yeah.
If you flip the thing around, it'll, so through the night, this thing is experiencing different loads.
Right. And quite honestly, that looks like a stock focuser, right?
It's close. It's a 2-inch Orion focuser, very low end. but it came with 1.25 inches, and I hacked the thing apart and put in a 2-inch.
But so you're not, so that's what is that scope? That's you say it's a 6-inch f6 or f5?
Yeah, this, so this, they were practically giving the scope away if you bought the mount. And if you paid an extra $100, you got the 6-inch f5 scope. And I thought, okay, well, I'll strip it for parts. Turned out to be a really good scope. I imaged with this for years. I only recently gave it to a friend, but yeah, it was a really good scope. I modified the focuser. Everything else I left alone was really quite good. The thing that finally convinced me to stop using it was I wanted a motorized focuser, a real one that connected to ASCOM, and I decided I didn't want to pay more for the focuser than my entire scope was worth. So I bought a more expensive scope. So then, that makes it okay.
So with that camera, what was your resulting image field of view?
Gosh, I'm going to say about 3/4 of a degree by 1.3 degree.
So then the flexure caused by that guide scope could that cause you problems with the flexure like you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you would see it. So it may be a wide field of view, but the pixel size on the camera is 3.9 microns.
Yeah.
So even a small amount of flexure, you can see it at times.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Were you seeing it? Actually
Yes,
seeing it?
occasionally, especially when I did dumb things like not tighten everything down quite a bit. And over time, things kind of loosen up. So every night trying to go through there, make sure everything was tight. But what also kind of killed me a bit is in the wind. Things vibrate a little bit, things move a little bit more, and every little bit counts. And
yeah, like that camera strap blowing in the wind.
Yeah, I mean, that's a terrible way to put a camera strap. That's a good point.
I see you've got a coiled cable coming down.
Yeah,
That's a spring.
The coiled cable isn't quite so bad as it looks because it only goes to the mount, and when I'm not using it, I hook it on the mount. So that's not so bad. And then that black cable that's going up and down has all my other power and communication stuff, and it's locked on. I worked out some connections, so that one's okay. But you're right, this camera strap is not a good arrangement. Typically, I would loop it over the top of the camera, and since then I've taken it off completely.
Thanks.
So Bill, I have a question about whether you see any value of use this tool called the guiding assistant, setting up your PHP2 equipment profiles. It seems like it's supposed to take care of a lot of features of different mounts and do stuff in the background that you might otherwise forget to do. And I certainly forgot to do it. I seems like a good idea. And I was also wondering if there's all these other tools there on the list. Yeah, you're bringing down like drift align, and there's even a comet tracker. You ever used any of that stuff? Or
Oh yeah, I have. It's good. So if it would, I'm sorry, I'm not connected to a scope, but what Dave's referring to is if you click on guiding assistant. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's going to also be helpful when you're off-axis guiding, you're trying to figure out something. What you do is you start this guiding assistant, and you just tell it to start, and it runs. It's accumulating a bunch of information for a few minutes, and then it'll give you guidance. It's going to suggest that you either increase or decrease in exposure time. It might say that your polar alignment's not good enough. It may suggest that you increase or decrease aggressiveness. So this can be helpful, particularly if you're first starting out. And when I first started out, this was a kind of a bewildering set of vocabulary. What do you mean aggressiveness on my right ascension ankles? So this can be really quite a nice tool. I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah, the guiding assistant. Just let it run for a while you're guiding, it accumulates information, and then it's going to tell you a bunch of things. So, including polar alignment error, which is nice. So the tool I use a lot over here is, not a lot, but anytime I adjust my mount, I'm now on a fixed gear. So about every few months, I go through a drift align.
Right.
And this is fantastic. I think I may have done a talk on this. If not, I'm happy to do it sometime in the future, but it walks you through it. I wish the print were a little bigger when you're out at the scope, but you select a star and it tells find a star near the meridian and the equator. And actually, if you're connected to a mount through ASCOM, you just say go, and it goes to some star that it thinks is the right one to look at. And then it drifts for a while, and you can adjust your, I think you start with azimuth and adjust your azimuth until the drift isn't there anymore. And then it'll advise you, okay, I'm going to do my altitude. So now click and it'll go to a star that it would be helpful for finding your altitude adjustment. You do the same thing. You let it drift. It'll give you a little trend line. You adjust it, zero that in, and you're all done. You can kind of go back and forth and verify it, but it's very accurate. I know the standard way in the past of doing this before the polar cameras, but I really like it the way they've implemented it here, because I bet I could drift a line about as fast as some people could use a polar alignment camera, and it's really quite accurate.
Yeah, I'm kind of really wishing I had looked through those tools a little more closely the last few weeks, because I didn't know anything about that. I've done kind of a ad hoc my own drift alignment, because I don't really have a view from my house of the pole star, and you can kind of fumble with it, but this was a great tool because it just does the tracking for you and it gives you a systematic approach. So
I think I'm actually drift aligned. I think I have an output page just to show you guys what it looks like. Nope. Yep. Here it is. I think this is the drift align I did the last time. Let's see. Yeah. Sorry to go off topic here, but this is a really good tool. I'm having trouble getting it to show the whole page.
And you're actually using the output of your imager for this, or the output of the off-axis?
It's the output of the auto guider. There we go. So yeah, perfect. That's kind of funny. So this, I was using the bullseye for some alignment, but anyway, you pick a star, and then the green, those standard green lines come on, and then there's this purple box. That purple box is your polar alignment error. When you start, it's just an enormous circle, and you click on this button down here. It says drift, and you can see in the graph on the upper right, it's drifting. It's showing you the drift that's occurring because you're not perfectly aligned, and these trend lines are giving you an idea about, is it noise or really? So you can see my right ascension is drifting. My declination isn't drifting quite so much. And then I adjust, in this example, I would adjust my altitude and start over, redrift, and see if that trend line, just iteratively kind of bring that trend line down. But what's nice too is you see down here, polar alignment error, 5 arc minutes. So you get an idea of what's really going on in real terms, and bring that in. It's really quite nice. And
What's
again,
the response time on that?
So I set the auto guider to be pretty fast. Well, it doesn't really matter how fast you do it, 1 arc second.
What I mean is, so now you make an azimuth adjustment. How fast before you know how long before you know you need to make a, you know, you need to keep tweaking?
About 20 seconds, which is probably slow for what you guys do with a polar camera, but you know, really not bad. You usually know pretty quickly, but this example here, I think, was 20 seconds.
And then you still have to keep tweaking it, tweaking it, tweaking it.
Yes.
You what now? All those, that's kind of nice. That would show you if you got some kind of cross component error. If your deck is maybe perfectly 90, but your right RA axis is, I'm sorry. If your RA and your deck axes are not perfectly orthogonal.
It does. It wouldn't pick it up here actually, and the reason is that it, while it will pick a star at the zenith, it doesn't pick a star at the horizon. You know, so it's not exactly wherever it's pointed in the sky, the star is drifting in two directions. So I don't, maybe it could. I haven't really looked at it. It's possible. You're right. I
would think that once you, if you zero your deck, and then as you try to zero your RA, if your deck then goes off to zero, that would tell you that your RA and deck are not perfectly orthogonal.
Yeah, you could be right. You know, again, because I leave my mount on a permanent pier, I just take a marginal night and I spend 30 minutes dialing this in. I lock everything down and leave it alone.
So I got a tripod I got to set up every night. So are you trying to apply peer pressure to me?
Yeah.
Well, I actually watching Landon last night with his mount. That was impressive. That was the plate solve and then tweak. He was done. That was faster than Polemaster. Absolutely faster than Polemaster.
Interesting. Okay, well, I know there's another topic, so Dan, I'll turn it back over to you. Guess I stopped share. Did I stop sharing? Hopefully?
Yeah, you did. Do you want to talk about the data, Joe, or?
Sure. So we've had a good year out at Dark Sky. There have been problems we've worked through early on, and a few problems here and there with the observatory roof over time, the weather station. But we've had a lot of really clear nights, and after having collected a lot of data and processed what seems like just a fraction of it so far and gotten some really good results, we kind of talked about whether it might be interesting to share some of it with the whole group in kind of a depth form. And in case any of the participants haven't had an opportunity to use really dark sky data to try your hand at processing. So every month or so coming forward, we'll probably release a one or two targets of data that we've collected, some of our favorites, and make them available in a Dropbox setup. And maybe that might even be something that we'll kind of look at target of the month and process it and compare our notes and techniques. But Dan and I have a couple runs at M20 and M21. I've captured them both in my field of view, and I think Dan, are you just M20? I think in your field of view.
Yeah, just M20.
Yeah, and we're going to. I'll send out a link to the whole group where you can pull down off of a Dropbox that the Dark Sky folks use. You can pull down the calibrated stacked images, so you won't have to go through the whole calibration process and star alignment. You can just start from that point. But the individual filters, I have red, green, blue, luminance, and HA for my image. Do you have something similar to that, Dan? The same?
Yeah, just no HA. M20 is fairly low for my big scope.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody's interested, but we just thought we'd share some of our work from this year and maybe get a little, not competition, but maybe a little bit of sharing of our techniques and experiences with processing. Maybe some future meetings, we might actually be able to talk about some things. Michael Gracio will be teeing up something for December probably. I think Rick, he may share some data coming forward. He's got a lot of data that he's not processed yet. But anyway, we thought we maybe let that the group use it and see what we came out of that. Maybe have some meeting topics in the future from that. Dan, do you have anything to add to it?
Not really. Like he said, it would be great to have a bunch of people process it, and then maybe someone step up and talk about what they did to get their result. It's something to try.
Yeah.
And the data tends to be fairly good, and not everyone can get out to dark sky sites. So I'm hoping that it's increases some interest.
It's a great idea.
One big thing I learned here, amongst many things, but with the dark sky setting, without the effects of dealing with the effects of light pollution, I kept going deeper and deeper and longer in my exposures. And certainly the mount and clouds and wind and that sort of thing can affect that. But one of the things I think I've come to realize is I've come to the limits of my camera. And I noticed that a number of images I've exposed through the summer especially, I overexposed them. I started to blow the stars out and was having troubles getting accurate colors or any colors, because once you expose all 3 colors of pixels to maximum brightness, that's the same as saying white. And so there are a number of things that we've learned along the way. Michael probably has some learnings as well, but being able to share some of the data and maybe even looking at some of those impacts might give you some ideas of what you're doing in St. Louis, or if you get outside of St. Louis for imaging. So, all right, I'll send that email out tomorrow morning sometime and just give you the links, and then we'll probably every month or so put out a few more images over the next 2 or 3 months and see how people like it.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys are willing to do that. I found it really helpful when Dan had me look at some data he had. And then later, I think Rick shared some data with me. And it was kind of eye-opening because I started to see, well, wow, I see this weird effect in my data. How come I don't see it in Dan's? And I start to realize, oh, well, his focus was better, or his exposure time was longer. And it helped me to see issues in my own data when I looked at someone else's. So it's really quite helpful.
Yeah, I think we really helpful learning experience for everyone, including newcomers like me. I was, in my previous working life, I was involved with similar projects on various bioanalytical techniques, and it's still something that sort of benchmarking amongst different labs and comparing how different people do stuff was always really informative, and it continues on to this day. The need for that's never going to go away, and we'll probably find out there's 10 different ways, and maybe somebody comes up with a way that's 10 times faster to get to the same place.
Okay.
Hey, Joe, not to go off topic too much, but so your remote setup is up and running well, or are there still some issues you're fighting, or things going well?
I think it's gotten smoother over the course of the year. Part of it's just the notion of the observatory being a startup, and the control. I would say the 2 things that I've kind of impacted me the most has been the roof controls. A lot of times the the roof will close and you don't know why. And they end up having some sort of problem with the controller. The weather station has also been sort of problematic, which controls some of the roof closures. If there's, we've had to kind of give them feedback on, they were getting very sensitive. Any amount of clouds showing up in the sky, they would cause a roof closure. And a cloud may drift over and suddenly the roof closes. And if it happens at 1 a.m, you've gone to bed, that blows up your sequence. And by that time, your sequence may have expired and you lose the rest of the night. So we've had to kind of go back and forth with them on that. They've had several problems with the weather station where they've actually had to just replace it because of failures. We had one, Michael, you may have to step in and I forget the term that they talked about, but they thought that they had I think they called it a microburst, where the roof actually came off the tracks. I suspect that it was just a maintenance issue and the track had gotten worn out, or there was something loose and it came and the roof came off the tracks, and then they had to get a backhoe or something and lift it back up and put it on the next day. And so there have been a few things like that. I think I've seen as much lately, but some of those items. And then for me, it's just learning, how to use my mount and my telescope. And I've noticed that, for instance, if I'm imaging near the celestial equator, I have the best tracking. But as I start to image more to the high declination, closer to the North Pole, I notice my mount must have just some slight little glitch, and I get RA spikes every once in a while to count them. Mostly, I don't think they affect my imaging too much, but sometimes they do. So things like that have been going on. But it's been a big learning experience. And I've gotten down to the point where every night, if I've got a set of images that I'm collecting that I've still got more hours to collect, I might take 5 or 10 minutes and I'm up and running, and I can leave it alone for the rest of the night. In the morning, I've got a lot of really high quality subframes to process. So I definitely have more subframes than time to work on them right now, which has never been the case in the past.
Yeah, my experience has been pretty much the same with them. I think my biggest issue or concern has been just with all the issues that happened at the beginning, has been a real demotivator for me. And I know it's been for several of the people on the dark sky side of things. And so I'm just starting to get back motivated into processing all the nice data that we're getting from this. And like Joe said, the camera seems to be the limit at this point in time, is being overexposing stuff. And it's just it's amazing to be able to get that type of data from down there and be able to have it to mess around with and experiment with.
I think the biggest thing for me has been that you can open on a whim, and I mean, I can be up and running in 15 minutes, even if clouds are going to come in. And so I will start it up, take a sequence for science, sometimes if the moon's real big, and just shut down or let it go. And here at home with my setup, it would take me an hour to set up because it was 300 pounds worth of equipment. And even my refractor, I can set it up really quick in the dark here, but it's not log into a computer, click a button and be ready to go in 10 or 15 minutes. So that's, I think, the best thing for me. Overall, our stuff's been pretty stable. We had roof issues this year after like 5 or 6 years, and they were really good about, they replaced a bunch of wood with steel, so we were down for about a week. But other than that, we're getting as much data as I can process, and I process pretty quick. When Andy moved out, he said he had at least 3 years of process data he could process. And he hadn't touched his scope since he installed it 4 years ago.
we did have a lot of smoke this year from all the fires, and I kind of made a joke in the summer that I threw away more subframes in a few months of relatively clear skies than I actually collected in the previous year altogether, just because I had so much data to pick through, and if I felt like the smoke was just too messed up the frame too much, then I would just toss it and the next night collect another 10 or 20 or 30. So that's been a great luxury.
Yeah, I tend to do the same at times. If I'm tired of something, I just set the sequence to take a bunch, and with the assumption, okay, I can throw away half of them if I want, and still get more than enough for a good image. But now that everything's running good, it takes me about 10 or 15 minutes to create a sequence for the night, and I can hit go on it and wake up in the morning and download the data.
Yeah.
So now I need to double up on the scopes.
So, okay, this goes kind of back to the auto guiding or the guiding. Well, actually, the polar alignment. So last night I was watching Brandon show me how he did a polar alignment with his ioptron scope. He has a built-in camera in the RA axis, and everybody's been talking about the plate solving solution for polar alignment, and that's what he used. And I was just, it was like, I think he had that. He could have had a complete polar alignment done in 30 seconds, maybe less than a minute. Are there any retrofits for like the Atlas EQ6 or other EQ gem mounts for doing something like that?
I don't know. I don't know if Steve's still here. I don't know if Sharp Cap will do. He's not here anymore. I don't know if Sharp Cap will do plate solving. I don't think the Pole Master will.
Well, that's just why I was wondering. I mean, I've heard people talk. Oh, okay. So when they talk about plate solving outside of this ioptron thing, that's with SGP or with Sharp Cap?
Well, I don't know if Sharp Cap will do it. If Sharp Cap would do it, then it would work with any camera that Sharp Cap would talk to, but I'm not sure that Sharp Cap actually does it.
So Dan, I'm pretty sure Sharp Cap does have a plate solve feature. I personally have not made it
For the
work
purpose of doing polar alignment.
Well, I don't know about polar alignment specifically, but it does connect to a plate solver.
Because Landon pulled up the screen, and I mean, it once he did the plate solve through the camera, the built-in camera, RA axis built-in camera, man, just showed this big red ball and a misalignment, and he just tweak, and he was right on. It was just.
I was watching a video, Astro Imaging Channel. It's a group not as good as this group, but they were showing a Sharp Cap plate solve, but it's not plate solve the way we would think of it per se, but it detects stars, certain stars around the pole, and you somehow rotate your mount until certain things line up in the view. I don't remember the details, but I remember they call it plate solving. It's
Okay.
more like star detection, and you have to give it a pretty darn clear hint, like you have to be really close to the star, and you have to even kind of guess, like, okay, this star is this. You give it one of the stars in the frame, and it can guess the rest.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the Optron deal is I think that the camera is wide enough that they supposedly say that you could, even if you can't see Polaris, as long as you can see some stars in that general direction, it tends to work.
I'm telling you, that would be really sweet if there was a tool that would use the Pole Master camera to do that process like ioptron uses.
Hey, Grant, it's called the iPolar.
iPolar, right? Yeah, right. But that's proprietary to Ioptron, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the one you saw that I have is built into the mount.
Right. And that's why my question started with, my correct question was based on, is there an upgrade or a retrofit to something like an EQ6 mount that has a built-in polar scope? But I would think there would be a nice built-in upgrade which would allow you to replace that optical scope with with a camera, and then you could do the same method that Ioptron uses for polar alignment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, but you're saying using the iPolar scope within like an EQ6.
No, not so much using the iPolar scope as much as, it's either a product that someone's already designed for this purpose, or it's a DIY. Here's how you remove your polar scope out of your EQ6, stick this thing in, and now you've got the same processes like the iPolar. So that's why I was asking if anybody knew if there was something like that. Because after watching what you did, Landon, man, that seems like
Isn't that easy? Takes less than 60 seconds.
Yeah, and so I would think there are a lot of people that like me that have got a pole master that would upgrade to something like that if it was economic.
I tell you, Grant, if you can see the pole star, I find with my EQ6, as long as I get Polaris near where it should be, as I'm setting it up, my time on the pole master is like a minute.
Oh yeah, well yeah, mine too. The thing is, we still have to go through the rotation thing, the 2 rotation. You got rotate.
You don't have to. You don't have to do. I mean, you can do that, but to be honest with you, I mean, I take my pole master off and on, and I don't mess with that. It's unless you're using something larger than what would go on your EQ6, it doesn't make a lot of difference. If you do it once, I just reuse the last one, so you don't have to rotate anything.
Oh really? Oh, I got to play with that. It's clear out tonight. I think I'll go play with that. Yeah, I noticed that when I start the process, it says use the same parameters as last time.
Yeah, it'll say something like use the same angle of rotation or something like that.
Yeah.
And unless you've dropped your mount or something, or you cross-threaded the pole master or something like that,
okay.
I mean, it's close enough that it should be good enough that you just reuse the old one. And so all you do is, click on Polaris, and then you drag the slider to move the circles around, and then you move the knobs and you're done.
Really?
Yeah, I don't never do the advanced stuff either. And that's good enough for me to take 30-minute exposures.
Oh yeah. Now I don't do that, but I always have to go through the, rotate the mount 60 degrees, click and double click, and then rotate the mount another 60 degrees, click, double click, and then rotate back to home. And then I go through the altitude and azimuth adjustments to zero it in.
Yeah, I would skip that stuff, just reuse it. And if it might make a difference for you, but I highly doubt it.
Oh, I've been way off on that, and I've gotten the results that I was looking for, within that, within, I don't do a lot of, well, I did. Sorry about that. I did. Yeah, when I was imaging Mars, yeah, I had to be pretty well spot on. Otherwise, that thing would drift in 1,000 frames. That would have a pretty good drift in it. Huh.
Yeah, but when you're talking about the planets, those are moving at different tracking rates, and so it's not necessarily the polar air that would cause a drift like that. Yes, not necessarily.
I wouldn't think Mars's motion in its orbit would be enough to cause half a frame drift in about 4,000 frames. That to me seems to be strictly polar alignment and drive accuracy.
Yeah, I would say it's more drive than polar polar issue, unless you were way off.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I have to really watch my alignment when I'm doing a 3x magnification with a f10 Schmidt, and I still don't have maybe 300 pixels of Mars. But yeah, if I just kind of do a half-ass polar alignment, I can get a lot of drift. But
Yeah,
I just watched
I
Landon
guess-
last night do the one shot.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the rotation stuff that only impacts how the camera is attached to the mount. So unless you're attaching it sideways or tilted or something, it should be you should do it once and it's probably good forever.
Okay, I'm gonna experiment with that. Thank you, because that eliminates the whole rotation thing, which is what.
Yeah, and that's what takes all the time.
Pardon?
And that's what takes all the time.
Yeah.
You got to wait for the mount to move around and reset it and all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. Whereas Landon just hooked it up, took an image, he called it a plate solve, and bang, it adjust your azimuth this way and your altitude that way, and it was a real time also. So, as he was making the adjustment, he could decide how perfect he wanted it to be. So, and I thought that was really an improvement. All right, well, it's clear tonight. I might experiment with that because I know the Leonids are a disappointment this year.
Yeah,
I
looked at RL Sky and there was a handful of meteors on it, but nothing unusual.
Oh yeah, it was. I got 800 images and about 1,600 aircraft trails, and maybe 5 or 6 meteor trails.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
Anyone else have anything?
Hey, Kerry.
Yes.
So once you get down to Mississippi, are you going to keep it on here, or are you going to kind of fade away?
Well, I don't know yet. I'm planning to still attend the virtual meetings for a while because until I figure out where astronomy is taking place down there. There's a couple of places, but they're about 75 to 100 miles away from where I'll be living.
Oh, kind of like us in Danville.
Yeah. So I got to wait till I get there and kind of test the waters, so to speak.
Have you looked for any groups down there?
Yeah, I went out to the astronomical. I can't think of the name. But anyway, and it only listed the group in Jackson, Mississippi.
Astronomical League?
Yeah, the astronomical. I went out to that site and searched in Mississippi, and it only listed the Jackson Astronomical Association.
And how far away is that from you?
About 100 miles.
Okay. So maybe it sounds like time to maybe do ASEM South, Astronomical Society of Eastern Mississippi.
Could be. That's what I mean. I don't know at the moment if there's other people living in that area that are doing astronomy. Since it's been 42 years since I lived in Mississippi.
Oh, probably are. I mean, we always see, people coming into ASEM or SLAS, with cameras or with imaging that they've been doing for years, and you never heard of them before, and they've just been solo.
Well, there's in French Camp. That's a little closer than Jackson, and it's at French Camp Academy. They have it's rainwater observatory.
Huh.
And they have several scopes there, and I had wrote them about visiting them, but the guy that I wrote to responded back telling me I needed to check out the Jackson Astronomical Association.
Yeah. As far as local goes, Jim Rose started ASEM by just putting an ad in a couple of local papers about anybody interested in astronomy. we're going to be getting together somewhere, and you do an awful lot of outreach. You can just set up a scope in the town square pretty much, and
Yeah. Yeah.
start seeing what kind of takers you got.
Right.
Hmm.
It'll be interesting.
Definitely will.
COVID is adds another component to it as well.
Pardon? What
I
does?
said COVID-19, is
Oh, by the time you
is
get done moving,
restricting.
it'll be gone. I mean, we got this we got this vaccine now, right?
Got 2 of them.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't, yeah, definitely.
Anybody else have anything they want to talk about?
I'm gonna log off. Good to see everyone.
Anybody been playing around with astrosurface?
I think we were all anxiously awaiting a presentation by someone.
That's right. I was going to try to get something for tonight, but things came up. Maybe probably December, because I really want to do that, but now I've got Thanksgiving to deal with. After that, I can probably put something together for you, Dan.
Yeah, anytime you'd want to do something,
Okay.
I think we'd have some interest. One other thing that I think Grant brought up was, with us using Zoom in the past, we've always tried to get like a Saturday workshop at the Weldon Springs Conference Center. And now we could potentially do something like that over Zoom pretty much any day. And it might be a good time. I think it's going to be months that we're going to be on Zoom anyway, but it might be a good time to come up with something, and if nothing else, a list of topics we're interested in. And there's more of a chance of me being able to find someone that can present if they can do it over Zoom. Because I think the last couple times we've tried to do a workshop, the issue hasn't been interest, the issue has been finding people to present. So now would be a good time to come up with something, and we can have several months to hash it out. And I mean, we can support up to 100 people too, if anyone has an interest.
Not sure what the topic would be right yet, but it's an option for the future for sure. Hey, Dave, you still on? Dave, you still there?
Yeah, still here.
So what is your, because I know Don is getting into this and he's working on the digital imaging post-processing aspect. And you've been working post-processing how long now?
Not that long. Really,
Because
couple months.
as opposed to Dan and Michael and Rick and the rest that are in the way advanced, I think I'm just kind of emerging from the very beginner stages of post-processing. And so people like you and Don and me, I think that's the reason why I was asking about the oh crap, sorry about that, surface, which seems to be a really good one-shot post-processing tool. And for me, I don't have a lot of time to get to the level of Dan and Mike and the rest. But I do want to put in more time to get past the beginning stage, which is just hacking around with not PHP, but you're just hacking around with a couple of tools in a couple of hours, and then getting back to it in a week or two, because of all the other interruptions. So maybe that would be something that you and Don and I and a couple of the other newer folks would take to, as one of these little seminars like that. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I'm definitely interested in something like astrosurface. If it's fairly easy to learn and gets you the first level of maybe a good enough image, that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay.
And I'm willing to spend some time with you speaking through that. I don't have a link to it. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but if you could get that maybe out there on the message board, we can all take a look at it.
All right. Yeah, I'll post that up on the digital SIG group. In the meantime, it's called Astrosurface. But
okay. Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, Grant, I think most of us would be interested in that. I mean, really the only planetary person here that spends a lot of time would be Rick.
But Rick's a perfectionist. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for a quick solution to anything.
That's kind of what I was thinking. That's exactly where I was. I thought it was what would be good for you guys is just a real fast, quick process. But I was thinking, but you guys already, you can pretty much look at your images and go and decide whether or not they're worth investing a lot of time in for processing, right? Post processing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Let me dig into that.
Gotta go.
Well, thanks for coming, Dave, or showing up, I guess.
Okay. I guess we're done here, Dan.
I guess so. If no one else has anything, I appreciate.
Oh yeah. About 30 seconds after we click the leave button. Who chatted? Oh yeah. Okay. All right. You guys have a good night.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for setting it up, Mon.
Thanks.